What you're about to hear is not a statement of facts, but an exploration of ancient mysteries, profound interpretations, and their unsettling potential correspondences with our present. This video aims to provoke thought, encourage critical observation, and explore deep questions about humanity's perception of time and destiny, not to present definitive truths or cause panic. The responsibility for final interpretation is always yours. For millennia, it lay hidden, a silent sentinel etched in stone, its true purpose obscured by the sands of time. The Chronos Stone, believed to be the oldest known calendar, held secrets that defied understanding. Until now. A groundbreaking team of linguists and astrophysicists claims to have finally cracked its code, revealing not just a record of ancient celestial events, but a chilling countdown. A countdown to 2026. This isn't a prediction of physical apocalypse, but a profound revelation about the end of an epoch, a shift in human consciousness, or perhaps the ultimate test of our collective spirit. Prepare to confront the deepest anxieties and hopes of humanity as we decode the whispers of the ancients and face the emotional earthquake of a future revealed. In the desolate, wind-swept plains of what was once ancient Mesopotamia, a discovery was made that would redefine our understanding of time itself. Buried for millennia beneath layers of dust and forgotten civilizations, archaeologists unearthed what they cautiously termed the Chronos Stone. It wasn't a grand monument, but a series of intricately carved basalt slabs, covered in symbols and astronomical alignments unlike anything seen before. Its estimated age? A staggering 2,600 years, predating many of the calendars we consider ancient. For decades, it remained an enigma, a beautiful, yet indecipherable relic. Scholars marveled at its precision in tracking celestial bodies, yet the deeper meaning of its complex cyclical patterns, its recurring numerical sequences, and its peculiar emphasis on certain future dates remained a profound mystery. It whispered of a knowledge far beyond its time, a wisdom that seemed to stretch from the dawn of civilization to a distant, unsettling future. This stone, silent for so long, held a secret about time, a secret about us, and a secret about 2026. The initial excitement of its discovery quickly gave way to academic frustration. The symbols resisted translation, the astronomical data seemed to point to events that hadn't yet occurred, and the sheer complexity of its interwoven cycles baffled the brightest minds. Some dismissed it as an elaborate astronomical almanac, others as a religious artifact, its true purpose lost to the mists of time. Yet a small, dedicated group of unconventional thinkers, led by the brilliant but controversial Dr. Eris Thorne, a polymath specializing in forgotten languages and archaeoastronomy, refused to give up. Thorne believed the Chronos Stone was more than a calendar. It was a message from the past, encoded for the future, designed to be understood only when humanity reached a certain point of technological and spiritual readiness. His obsession with the stone bordered on madness as he spent countless nights poring over its etchings, convinced that the key lay not just in its astronomical data, but in its subtle, emotional resonance, its almost palpable sense of impending revelation. The Chronos Stone, with its intricate carvings of celestial bodies, mythical figures, and abstract patterns, seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. It spoke of cosmic cycles, of ages rising and falling, and humanity's place within a grand, universal design. But what truly captivated Thorne, and what would eventually lead to his groundbreaking and terrifying discovery, were the subtle numerical anomalies embedded within its longest cycle. These anomalies, initially dismissed as carving imperfections or random variations, began to form a pattern. A countdown. A countdown that, when finally decoded, pointed to a year that would send shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. 2026. This wasn't just a historical artifact, it was a ticking clock. And the emotional weight of its silent message was about to crash upon a modern world, forcing humanity to confront its deepest fears and most profound questions about its own destiny. For decades, the Chronos Stone resisted every attempt at full translation. Its intricate symbols, a blend of known ancient scripts and entirely unique glyphs, seemed to mock modern scholarship. But Dr. Eris Thorne, driven by an almost spiritual conviction, believed the key wasn't just in linguistics, but in a deeper, universal language, mathematics, and celestial mechanics. His breakthrough came not in a dusty library, but in the sterile glow of a supercomputer, where he began to feed the stone's astronomical data, cross-referencing it with obscure ancient numerology and, controversially, with patterns found in quantum physics. He hypothesized that the stone's creators possessed a knowledge of cosmic cycles far beyond what we attributed to ancient civilizations. Thorne's team, a small, eccentric group of specialists including a theoretical physicist, a master cryptographer, and a neuroscientist studying collective consciousness, worked in isolation. They focused on the stone's longest and most complex cycle, a grand cosmic calendar spanning millennia. Within this cycle, Thorne had identified what he called numerical echoes, subtle, repeating sequences that seemed to deviate from the expected astronomical patterns. These weren't errors. They were deliberate anomalies, like a hidden message woven into the fabric of time itself. He theorized that these echoes were a form of ancient encryption, a way to mark specific points in the distant future. The moment of revelation was not a sudden flash, but a slow, agonizing convergence of data. As the supercomputer processed the numerical echoes, a pattern emerged. A sequence of dates, each marked by a unique celestial alignment, but also by a corresponding shift in the stone's symbolic language. The team realized that the stone wasn't just recording the past, it was mapping a future trajectory. And at the end of this trajectory, embedded within the final, most complex echo, was a date. A specific year. The year 2026. The air in the lab grew heavy with a mixture of awe and profound dread. This wasn't a vague prophecy. It was a precise countdown. The emotional impact on Thorne and his team was immediate and overwhelming. The cryptographer, a man of logic and reason, reportedly broke down, muttering about the hubris of man. The theoretical physicist, usually stoic, stared blankly at the glowing screen, his face pale. Thorne himself, despite his years of obsession, felt a cold dread grip his heart. This wasn't just an academic achievement. It was a terrifying revelation. The oldest calendar known to man had just delivered a message from 2,600 years ago, a message that spoke directly to their present and their immediate future. The whisper of numbers had become a shout, echoing across millennia, and its chilling message was clear: time is not endless. It is a river with a destination. And that destination, according to the Chronos Stone, was fast approaching. The decodification of the Chronos Stone sent shockwaves through the scientific community, then the media, and finally the world. The revelation of a precise countdown to 2026, hidden for 2,600 years in the oldest known calendar, ignited a global firestorm of fear, fascination, and fervent debate. But what exactly did the Chronos Stone predict for this pivotal year? Thorne and his team were quick to clarify. This was not a prediction of a physical, cataclysmic end of the world in the traditional sense. Instead, the ancient text spoke of the end of an epoch, a profound, irreversible shift in human consciousness, a redefinition of reality, and a culmination of cycles that would fundamentally alter the human experience. The stone's final sequences, the ones pointing to 2026, depicted not destruction, but a great unveiling. It spoke of veils being lifted, of hidden truths becoming apparent, and a humanity being forced to confront its deepest illusions. This wasn't a sudden event, but the culmination of a long, slow process, a crescendo of change that would reach its peak in that fateful year. The emotional impact of this interpretation was immediate. For some, it brought a sense of liberation, a hope for a new, enlightened era. For others, it fueled existential dread, the terrifying prospect of losing everything they knew, their very sense of self and reality being challenged. Thorne's team delved deeper into the symbolic language associated with the 2026 marker. It spoke of a great silence preceding a great awakening. The Great Silence was interpreted as a period of profound introspection, forced by external events, where humanity would be stripped of its distractions and confronted with its collective shadow. The Great Awakening was the subsequent phase, a leap in consciousness, but one that would be painful, disorienting, and potentially shattering for those unprepared. The stone suggested that this transition would be marked by an intense emotional purging, a collective reckoning with humanity's past mistakes and its true potential. The world reacted with a spectrum of emotions. There was panic, with some interpreting it as a literal doomsday, leading to hoarding and social unrest. There was denial, with skeptics dismissing it as a hoax or a misinterpretation, clinging to the comfort of the known. And there was a profound sense of introspection as individuals began to question their lives, their beliefs, and their place in the universe. The Chronos Stone, silent for so long, had finally spoken, and its message was not just a prediction, but a profound challenge to humanity's very soul. It forced everyone to ask, are we ready for what time has revealed? The emotional landscape of the planet was shifting, preparing for a future that was no longer distant or abstract, but terrifyingly imminent. The initial euphoria and intellectual fascination surrounding the Chronos Stone's decoding quickly gave way to a palpable collective shiver of fear and denial. The human mind, inherently wired for survival and comfort, struggles to process information that threatens its fundamental sense of security and continuity. The idea of an end of an epoch in 2026, even if not a physical apocalypse, was terrifying enough to trigger a wide range of emotional responses across the globe, revealing the raw, unfiltered anxieties of humanity. For many, the first reaction was outright denial. Governments and mainstream media, wary of mass panic, downplayed the findings, emphasizing the interpretive nature of ancient texts and the lack of scientific consensus. Experts were brought in to debunk Thorne's work, labeling it as pseudoscience or a dangerous misinterpretation. This served to temporarily quell widespread alarm, but for those who had truly absorbed the implications of the Chronos Stone, it only deepened a sense of unease. They saw the denial as a coping mechanism, a collective refusal to look into the abyss of an uncertain future. However, beneath the surface of denial, profound fear began to fester. Individuals started to exhibit symptoms of existential anxiety, increased insomnia, heightened irritability, a pervasive sense of dread, and a desperate search for meaning in a world suddenly devoid of familiar certainties. Psychologists reported a surge in patients struggling with pre-apocalyptic stress, a condition fueled by the constant, subtle reminders of the impending date. People began to question their life choices, their priorities, and the very foundations of their existence. The comfort of routine was shattered, replaced by a gnawing sense of urgency. The fear also manifested in more extreme ways. There were reports of increased hoarding of supplies, a rise in survivalist communities, and a surge in interest in spiritual and esoteric practices as people desperately sought answers or solace outside conventional systems. Social media became a battleground of conflicting narratives, fervent believers clashing with aggressive skeptics, each side fueled by their own anxieties and convictions. The emotional fabric of society began to fray, revealing the fragility of human composure when confronted with the possibility of a profound, irreversible change. The Chronos Stone, in its silent wisdom, had not just predicted a future event, it had already begun to trigger the emotional earthquake that would precede it, forcing humanity to confront its deepest fears and its capacity for both resilience and despair. As the initial waves of fear and denial subsided, replaced by a pervasive undercurrent of anxiety, humanity embarked on a desperate search for meaning. The Chronos Stone's countdown to 2026, and its prophecy of an end of an epoch, forced an unprecedented collision between the realms of spirituality and science. Traditional institutions, once rigid in their doctrines, found themselves grappling with questions that transcended their established frameworks, while scientific minds began to explore concepts previously relegated to the esoteric. Religious leaders worldwide found their congregations grappling with renewed questions of faith, destiny, and divine intervention. Some interpreted the Chronos Stone as a confirmation of ancient prophecies within their own texts, seeing 2026 as a divinely ordained turning point. Others preached messages of hope and resilience, urging their followers to focus on inner transformation and compassion in the face of uncertainty. The emotional responses ranged from fervent devotion and a desperate clinging to dogma, to profound spiritual crises and a questioning of long-held beliefs. The comfort of faith was both a refuge and a challenge. Concurrently, the scientific community, initially dismissive, found itself drawn into the enigma. Astrophysicists re-examined celestial alignments, searching for any physical phenomena that could correspond to the Chronos Stone's predictions. Neuroscientists began to explore the concept of collective consciousness shifts, hypothesizing how external cosmic influences or societal pressures could indeed trigger widespread changes in human perception and behavior. The lines between empirical data and philosophical inquiry blurred, as scientists, too, sought to understand the deeper implications of a calendar that seemed to defy conventional logic. The emotional landscape of this search was complex. There was a desperate hope for answers, a yearning for clarity in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. There was also intellectual arrogance, as some tried to force ancient wisdom into modern scientific paradigms, or vice versa, leading to further fragmentation and confusion. Yet, in the quiet moments of introspection, millions began to ask profound questions. What is the nature of time? Is destiny predetermined, or do we have free will? What truly matters when faced with the possibility of a fundamental shift in reality? The Chronos Stone had not just revealed a date. It had ignited a global existential crisis, forcing humanity to confront its deepest spiritual and philosophical questions and to find solace or terror in the uneasy alliance between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. As 2026 loomed closer, the global emotional landscape became increasingly polarized, creating a great divide between fervent believers and staunch skeptics. This wasn't merely an intellectual disagreement, it was a deeply emotional chasm, fueled by fear, conviction, and a desperate need for certainty in an uncertain world. The Chronos Stone, once a mere archaeological curiosity, had become the ultimate litmus test for humanity's capacity to cope with the unknown. The believers, often drawn from communities already open to spiritual or conspiratorial narratives, embraced the Chronos Stone's message with a zealous fervor. For them, it was a validation of long-held suspicions about hidden truths and impending shifts. They found solace and purpose in preparing, whether spiritually, physically, or emotionally, for the end of an epoch. Their emotions ranged from excited anticipation of an awakening to profound anxiety about the challenges ahead. They formed online communities, shared interpretations, and often clashed vehemently with anyone who dared to question the stone's authenticity or Thorne's decoding. Their conviction was a shield against the overwhelming uncertainty, but it also led to an emotional rigidity, a refusal to consider alternative explanations. On the other side stood the skeptics, predominantly those rooted in empirical science, mainstream media, and conventional rationality. For them, the Chronos Stone's countdown was a dangerous delusion, a catalyst for mass hysteria, and a prime example of humanity's susceptibility to irrational fears. They argued vehemently for logic, evidence, and critical thinking, dismissing the interpretations as pseudoscience or a deliberate hoax. Their emotions ranged from frustration and intellectual exasperation at the perceived irrationality of the believers, to a genuine fear for social stability and the potential for widespread panic. They saw their role as guardians of reason, desperately trying to anchor society in reality amidst the rising tide of fear. The emotional clashes between these two factions became increasingly aggressive. Online forums devolved into vitriolic debates. Families were torn apart by differing beliefs. Friendships fractured under the weight of irreconcilable worldviews. The Great Divide wasn't just about what people believed. It was about how they felt about the future, about their coping mechanisms for existential dread, and about their fundamental trust in institutions versus intuition. The Chronos Stone, in its silent prophecy, had inadvertently exposed the deep fissures within human society, revealing how fragile our collective harmony truly is when confronted with a prophecy that challenges our very perception of time and destiny. Beyond the global debates and societal divisions, the impending 2026 countdown from the Chronos Stone forced a profound personal reckoning within countless individuals. Stripped of the usual distractions and confronted with the possibility of a fundamental shift in reality, people were compelled to look inward, engaging in an intense period of introspection and, for many, a deeply personal transformation. The emotional journey was often arduous, but ultimately profoundly revealing. For some, this reckoning manifested as a desperate reevaluation of their lives. Careers that once seemed important now felt hollow. Relationships that were superficial crumbled under the weight of existential questions. Individuals began to shed societal expectations, pursuing long-dormant passions, reconnecting with estranged family members, or seeking out deeper spiritual connections. The fear of the end of an epoch paradoxically became a catalyst for living more authentically, for embracing vulnerability, and for confronting unresolved emotional baggage. The urgency of the countdown spurred a desperate desire to get things right before the unknown arrived. For others, the introspection led to a profound sense of peace. By accepting the possibility of radical change, they found liberation from the anxieties of control and predictability. They embraced mindfulness, meditation, and a deeper connection to nature, seeking solace in the present moment rather than obsessing over an uncertain future. This emotional transformation was marked by a quiet resilience, a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life, and a profound sense of interconnectedness with humanity and the cosmos. They learned to surrender to the flow of time, rather than fight against its inevitable currents. However, for a significant portion, the personal reckoning was agonizing. Confronted with their own mortality, their unfulfilled dreams, and their deepest regrets, they spiraled into despair, anxiety, and even nihilism. The emotional weight of the countdown was too heavy, leading to a sense of helplessness and resignation. They struggled to find meaning in a world that seemed to be hurtling towards an unknown fate, unable to reconcile their personal desires with the looming collective shift. The Chronos Stone, in its silent wisdom, had not just predicted a date. It had become a mirror, reflecting humanity's deepest fears and highest aspirations, forcing each individual to confront their own emotional landscape and choose how they would navigate the uncharted waters of a shifting reality. As the calendar pages turned, and the year 2026 drew relentlessly closer, the world's emotional state became a complex tapestry woven from threads of pervasive anxiety and surprising pockets of hope. The Chronos Stone's decoded countdown had become an undeniable part of the global consciousness, a background hum that influenced everything from daily conversations to geopolitical strategies. The end of an epoch was no longer just a theory. It was a looming presence, casting a long shadow over humanity's collective psyche. The anxiety manifested in countless ways. Economic markets became volatile, reacting nervously to every news cycle, every expert opinion, every new interpretation of the ancient calendar. Social unrest simmered in various regions, fueled by the underlying fear of scarcity, control, or the unknown. Mental health crises surged, as individuals struggled to cope with the profound uncertainty and the constant bombardment of conflicting information. There was a palpable sense of unease in the air, a feeling that the world was holding its breath, waiting for an invisible shoe to drop. The collective dread was almost a physical entity, weighing down on populations. Yet, amidst this pervasive anxiety, unexpected sparks of hope began to emerge. Communities rallied together, forming support networks and sharing resources, driven by a newfound sense of human solidarity. Innovations in sustainable living and alternative technologies accelerated, as people sought solutions that could withstand potential disruptions. There was a surge in artistic expression, as musicians, writers, and visual artists channeled the collective emotional turmoil into powerful works that explored themes of resilience, transformation, and the human spirit. The very threat of an end of an epoch seemed to awaken a dormant creativity and a desperate desire to build a better future, regardless of what lay ahead. The global pulse, therefore, was contradictory. It was a rhythm of fear and courage, of despair and determination, of fragmentation and unexpected unity. The Chronos Stone, in its silent prophecy, had become a catalyst, forcing humanity to confront its deepest emotional extremes. It revealed not just a potential future event, but the raw, unfiltered emotional landscape of a species grappling with its own mortality and its place in the grand cosmic design. The countdown to 2026 was not just a measure of time. It was a measure of humanity's emotional resilience, its capacity for both profound anxiety and an unyielding, defiant hope. As the final weeks, then days, then hours of 2025 bled into the terrifying reality of 2026, the world held its breath. The Chronos Stone's countdown had reached its final cadence, and the emotional tension was almost unbearable. Every news report, every social media post, every personal interaction seemed charged with the unspoken question, is this it? Is the end of an epoch truly upon us? The collective emotional state was a volatile mix of fervent anticipation, paralyzing fear, and a desperate, clinging hope. Governments had issued vague warnings, advising preparedness without specifying for what. Financial markets had become erratic, swinging wildly between panic selling and speculative buying. Social media was a torrent of last-minute prophecies, scientific analyses, spiritual pleas, and raw, unfiltered human emotion. People gathered in public squares and homes, in places of worship, seeking solace, community, or simply a shared experience of the unknown. The world had become a single, vast auditorium, waiting for the curtain to rise on a performance whose script was written 2,600 years ago. Thorne and his team, now under intense global scrutiny, made their final statements. They reiterated that the Chronos Stone did not predict physical destruction, but a shift in perception, a recalibration of reality. They spoke of a moment when humanity would be forced to see itself, and the universe, in an entirely new light. Their words, meant to calm, often only intensified the emotional roller coaster. For some, it was a promise of enlightenment. For others, a terrifying loss of all familiar anchors. The emotional impact of these final moments was profound. Families clung to each other, friends reconciled, strangers offered words of comfort. There was a desperate surge of humanity, a raw outpouring of love and fear, as people confronted their deepest vulnerabilities. The air was thick with unspoken goodbyes and silent prayers. The world was at the brink of revelation, not knowing if it would be a dawn or a dusk, a rebirth or a final reckoning. The Chronos Stone, in its ancient wisdom, had orchestrated the ultimate emotional test, pushing humanity to its limits, forcing it to face the profound question, Who are we truly when all illusions are stripped away? The countdown was over. The moment of truth had arrived. The moment passed. The calendar turned. 2026 arrived. Yet the world did not end in fire or flood. There was no sudden cataclysm, no dramatic collapse of civilization. But for those who had lived through the intense emotional countdown, something profound had undeniably shifted. The end of an epoch, as predicted by the Chronos Stone, was not an event, but a process, a subtle yet irreversible recalibration of reality that had begun to unfold. The aftermath was not a clean slate, but a world forever changed, subtly, yet fundamentally, by the emotional crucible it had just endured. The most immediate emotional impact was a pervasive sense of disorientation. For those who had prepared for a dramatic, visible end, the apparent normalcy of the new year was unsettling. Some felt a profound sense of anticlimax, even betrayal, by the ancient prophecy. Others felt a quiet relief, a deep gratitude for continuity. But beneath these initial reactions, a new reality began to surface. The great unveiling was not a single moment, but a gradual, creeping awareness. The invisible digital chains that Thorne had warned about in his other theories, subtly tightening over years, now seemed undeniably present. Digital identity systems, once resisted, gained rapid, almost unquestioning adoption, promising efficiency and security in a world exhausted by uncertainty. Digital currencies, previously niche, became the default, silently reshaping financial autonomy. The engineered consensus became more sophisticated, with AI-driven narratives weaving seamlessly into daily life, making it harder than ever to discern objective truth from manufactured reality. The resource consolidation play continued quietly, with key resources increasingly controlled by a few, now normalized as a necessary stability measure. The true end of an epoch was the erosion of certainty, the normalization of surveillance, and the subtle shift in human perception. People found themselves questioning their own memories, their own beliefs, their own capacity for independent thought. The emotional resilience that had been forged in the countdown was now tested by a new kind of subtle, pervasive control. The world wasn't reborn in a blaze of glory. It was subtly, irrevocably reshaped. The Great Awakening was not a sudden burst of enlightenment, but a slow, painful realization that the nature of reality itself had been altered, and that the true battle for consciousness had just begun. The Chronos Stone had not predicted a physical end, but a psychological and societal transformation. The emotional impact lingered, a heightened sense of awareness for some, a resigned acceptance for others, and a lingering, unsettling question for all. Had the end of an epoch truly passed? Or had it just begun in a way no one expected, a silent, insidious shift that redefined what it meant to be human? The world was not destroyed, but was undeniably different, carrying the indelible emotional scars and profound lessons of a countdown that had changed everything. The year 2026 has passed, leaving behind not a wasteland, but a world subtly, yet profoundly transformed. The Chronos Stone's countdown, once a source of global terror and fascination, now stands as a chilling testament to humanity's capacity for both profound anxiety and unexpected resilience. The end of an epoch was not the dramatic, visible apocalypse many feared, but a subtle, insidious recalibration of reality, a shift in the very fabric of human experience that continues to unfold. The question is no longer if the ancient prophecy was true, but what its legacy means for humanity's future and how we choose to navigate this new, uncertain landscape. The emotional scars of the countdown are real. The collective shiver of fear, the desperate search for meaning, the great divide between believers and skeptics, these experiences have left an indelible mark. For some, it has led to a deeper sense of awareness, heightened sensitivity to the subtle currents of control and manipulation in the world. For others, it has fostered a weary resignation, a passive acceptance of a reality that feels increasingly beyond their influence. But for all, the Chronos Stone has revealed a profound truth. Time is not endless. It is a river with a destination, and that destination, it seems, is a future where the lines between freedom and control, truth and illusion, are increasingly blurred. The true challenge of the end of an epoch is not to survive a cataclysm, but to reclaim our autonomy in a subtly controlled world. It's about recognizing that the great unveiling is an ongoing process, a continuous stripping away of illusions, demanding constant vigilance and critical thought. It's about understanding that the invisible digital chains are not just external technologies, but also internal habits of thought and perception that we must consciously break. It's about resisting the engineered consensus by cultivating independent thought, seeking diverse perspectives, and fiercely protecting our inner truth. So I challenge you directly, here and now. What have you learned from the countdown to 2026? Have you allowed the subtle shifts to define your reality, or have you chosen to awaken to the deeper truths? Are you passively accepting the aftermath, or are you actively shaping your own future? The Chronos Stone, silent for millennia, has delivered its message. Its legacy is not just a warning. It is a profound invitation to introspection, to transformation, and to a conscious reclaiming of our humanity. Leave your deepest thoughts and insights in the comments below. How has the countdown to 2026 impacted your emotional landscape? What steps are you taking to navigate this new reality? Do you possess the courage, the conviction, the inner fortitude to share this vital message with your friends, your family, your world? Share this video far and wide. Let's collectively unravel the profound mysteries that powerful entities tirelessly attempt to hide from us all. The time for passive observation, for comfortable ignorance is over. The time for conscious awakening and decisive action has arrived. Your choice today shapes tomorrow's reality. What will your legacy be in a world forever changed by the whispers of an ancient stone?